Hey, Todd DeWalt here from ConstructionLeadingEdge.com, and thanks for listening to the Construction Leading Edge podcast. If this is your first time listening, then we are all about helping construction business owners eliminate chaos, get out of firefighting mode, and have more time, more freedom, more impact, and more wealth. So if you want to get out of your business, have it run without you, have less chaos, you're in the right place. Here's what I have for you today. It's an interview with one of our clients, Jeff Bowers. Jeff is the owner of Masterpiece Design Build, and they have been custom designing, building, and renovating distinctive residences and commercial properties on the Treasure Coast of Florida, near Stuart, Florida, for over 30 years now. And Jeff's a great guy. He's got a lot of wisdom to share. And here's what you're going to take away from this conversation. Lessons from a few decades of owning a construction business. Jeff talks about the real reason behind a lot of customer horror stories on construction projects, how he realized several years ago that he didn't have the right systems in place in his business. We dig into some of the systems and processes that he's implemented in the past 2 years and the impact they've had on him and his team. He shares the advice that he wished he had received, or maybe he actually received, but wishes he would have listened to it back when he got started in business. He'll share about his experience with our team in the Systematize Your Construction Business program and how life and business are different for him now. He also talks about what's in it for him and the benefits he's been able to receive as part of our CEO Alliance program, and how he has a board of directors now, essentially, and some of the goals that Jeff is focused on now after working on his business for the last couple of years. So if you would like to join guys like Jeff and the growing group of builders, remodelers, and general contractors who are eliminating chaos, who are getting out of day-to-day firefighting and operating as the CEO of their businesses, then I would encourage you to take the first step. And this is the step that Jeff took and every one of our clients took. They applied for a business evaluation call with my team, and you can go to ConstructionLeadingEdge.com and tap the Apply Now button, or go to ConstructionLeadingEdge.com/apply, APPLY. All right, without further ado, let's get to my conversation with my friend Jeff Bowers. Enjoy. All right, Jeff Bowers. This interview has been in the works for a while, so we've talked about this in at least 2 different states, Texas and Florida, I believe. So welcome to the Construction Leading Edge podcast. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. I'm pretty excited. This long-awaited day is finally here.
It has. It has been long awaited. I've been looking forward to this one. So we're going to cover a lot of stuff, but let's talk about you. Talk about your business. Tell us a little bit about your company, where you're located, and what kind of work you do, and then we'll get into your backstory. How's that sound?
Okay, sounds great. Yeah, we're in Stuart, Florida, which is on the east coast of Florida, just north of the Palm Beaches. And we call this area the Treasure Coast. Back in the 1600s, there was a lot of treasure ships that got crashed by hurricanes. And so that's how we got our name here. Stuart's a great town on the water. We're blessed to have, on the Atlantic Ocean, we're blessed to have a couple different rivers, miles and miles of waterfront property, which is awesome if you're in the construction business, which we are. So what we do, I guess our visioning statement says it pretty well, that we are striving to be the local leader in the design build of upper end custom homes, major renovations, waterfront remodels, and a little bit of light commercial sprinkled in to make it interesting.
All right. So you've been at this a while. How long have you been in construction?
Depending on where we paint the start line, I graduated from high school in 1977, and that summer was working as a carpenter's helper. And all through high school, I would have told you I was probably going to finish undergraduate and then apply for law school. Kind of thought maybe I would be headed into that arena. It's funny how God knows better, and God has other plans. And that summer of my last year of high school, I was working as a carpenter's helper. looking back on it, I guess the guy I was working for might have been a little slow, because next thing I know, I find myself on a ladder with a paintbrush in my hand. And I did that for about a month. And I thought, wow, this is pretty easy. This looks like an opportunity. So at 17, 18 years old, with me, my beach baggies, and a Toyota pickup truck, decided to become a painting contractor. And so my first year of junior college, I stayed local, was able to kind of get that started, and kind of fumbled along pretty much like a teenage kid would do. When I tell you some of the backstory, though, of like how I grew up and my family connections and stuff, I guess this would be a good time to tell you that, right? That's part of the story.
Yeah.
So I grew up in Indiana, and in the farm country of Indiana, and we moved to Florida when I was 13. And my dad and my uncles were always building lake cottages or houses for one another, and I one of those kids that, 2 or 3 years old, crawling around on job sites, banging nails into boards. And, again, even with all that I was around, I never dreamed that someday I'd end up as a general contractor. So we moved to Florida, graduated from high school. I had worked a couple of summers, a couple odd jobs as a carpenter's helper, but then decided to become a painting contractor. But a year into it, I went to my dad, who is very handy, taught me a lot. He was not a builder by trade, but I talked him into coming into business with me as a painting contractor. So he agreed, and he said, but if we're going to do it, we need to get legit. Need to start wearing painter's whites, clean up our act. He wasn't going to go along with the way I was doing things. So we did, and did that for a couple of years together while I finished junior college. He ran things when I went off to UCF to get my degree in business in Orlando. It was close enough to home that I could come home and work with him on weekends and summers and whatnot. So graduated and came back to Stuart in the early 80s, 1980s. So depending on when you define the start line, I kind of started in 77, came back in 83. But as we were painting through the early 80s, we started to morph a little bit, because we'd have customers come to us and say, well, while you're here, can you guys also install crown molding for me? While you're here, could you rehang this door? Could you make these repairs? Could you do this or that? So that really started the transition for me. And in 1988, got my state general contractor's license and kind of branched off. What was originally Masterpiece Painting and Decorating became Masterpiece Builders. My dad and my younger brother continued on with the painting business. I took the fork in the road to start the construction company, and have been doing that ever since. They know us now as Masterpiece Design Build. We rebranded 6 or 7 years ago. Masterpiece Design Build really describes what we do and how we serve clients quite a bit better.
So let's talk about the transition from painting contractor to custom homes. That's a tough transition to make, to go from a specialty trade to a general contractor, from a painter to a custom builder. What, if you could go back and do that over again, what would you do differently to make that transition easier, simpler, faster, less painful?
Well, understand, first of all, I don't look as a difficult transition, because I think more custom builders need to have a better understanding of the fine details of finish. And I understand coatings. I understand how things are supposed to be finished properly. But in those early years getting started, I didn't start out in 1989 or 88 building a custom home. I did a lot of siding replacement. I did a lot of window replacement. I did a little bit of kitchen remodeling, a lot of bathroom remodeling. Frankly, looking back on it, I did pretty much anything I could to pay the bills. At that point, I was married. We had a couple of young kids in those early years. Later had a third one. So I don't look back on that thinking that I would do the transition any different. As we talk through this and we talk about more current times, I think I would have focused more on on business and less on being a good contractor. But that's not what you asked.
No, that's good. So you've seen some downturns. You've been through maybe a couple of cycles of downturns. So there are people listening who got hit pretty hard in 2008, myself included. We've been through a few bumps in the road in the past few years with COVID and interest rates and lumber prices and things like that. What advice would you have for somebody who maybe hasn't dealt with a downturn? How would you, first of all, now that you've been through a few downturns, how do you deal with those? How do you think about those downturns? If that makes sense.
It does. And I'll share a little of my experience with that. Sure, there were downturns. I guess probably the one I remember looking back, the downturn of what they call the dot-com bust in 99, 2000. Then the thing that anybody listening to this or watching this podcast, the thing that stands out to me, we all have to remember we're in an industry that we really can't control. There are so many external factors. We can all control how we structure and how we run our businesses, but we can't control the national economy, the global economy. We can't control weather events. We can't control pandemics. So when there are, market forces that happen, sometimes you just have to roll with it. So the biggest one that we all remember was the 2008 to 2011 debacle of the meltdown. And I wasn't very smart in those years. I pledged a lot of personal assets in those years in our local community. Any buildable lot out there was being bought up by large builders. So I kind of bought into that mentality that it'd be good to have several lots in our portfolio to be able to offer for, design build for clients. And when the music stopped, Jeff was not in a chair. The music stopped with me owing some banks for some lots, and it hit us pretty hard. And came out of that having to start over. During those years, was able to get two of our older kids through college. The youngest one was still in middle school and high school at the time. But so that would be the thing that I would say is just understand that we're in a business that we can't control the events around us. All we can do is prepare and try to insulate ourselves the best we can. And I distinctly remember in 2006, 2007, as all of that was happening, I remember having a discussion with the credit manager of the bank that I was dealing with who said, Jeff, how are you going to make sure that all this stuff gets repaid? Having been through several downturn cycles, my response was, well, no big deal. We'll be able to do enough remodeling and renovation work that we'll be able to cover everything and, we'll come out the other side if that happens. Well, I didn't count on the fact that when the meltdown happened in 2009, everybody's property values dropped and nobody had any equity and there was nothing happening in our industry. I didn't count on that. So I think all you can do is just be smart, be somewhat conservative, know what your level of risk is and be prepared. You can't control what you can't control, but you can control what you can control.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. You mentioned, I think the way you were thinking back when things were good was like most of us think. That's how I was when I had my business. Like to some degree, to start a construction business, you have to have a certain mindset. You have to be okay with taking risks. It's a little bit of a cowboy attitude, which is required. Otherwise, you would never get off the starting blocks. But then sometimes it can be a double-edged sword when it's like, I think everything's going to be okay. We're going to, if I look back at my career, I was probably hooked on hopium, at points. Like, I hope it's going to be okay. Yeah, everything's going to work out, right? It's going to be fun. And then, I've had the music stop a couple of times, and Todd didn't have a chair either. So I'm curious.
Well, when we're in our 20s and 30s, we feel invincible sometimes,
Yeah.
It's kind of normal, I guess.
Which has its place, but then it's like, I've heard people say it's not your weaknesses that get you in trouble, it's your strengths when they're not managed properly. And I think that's the case for a lot of us. There's a study I've been looking at on why successful contractors self-destruct. And what it comes down to is when contractors fail, it doesn't happen to them. They do it to themselves. And that's, if I look back at when I had my business, I did it to myself. And part of it was, there was one line in there, and it was one of the root causes was leaders had this, leaders believed they would incur no bad luck, right? Leaders would incur no bad luck, almost like expecting the best case scenario. And that stung a little bit because that's how I was. I just expected everything was going to work out. And of course it didn't. So I'm curious, when things are good, what does being prepared, what does being conservative, what does being smart look like when things are good to be prepared for when the inevitable downturn comes? What do you think?
Well, I remember coming out of that, Todd, and I remember talking with a mentor who I really valued his insight. And, I think when we do stuff like that, I know in my case, probably with you too, when that kind of stuff happens, you kind of you walk away from the smoldering ashes and you feel a little bit of guilt, a little bit of like, oh God, why did I do that? And, I was pretty hard on myself. And I just remember my friend Don saying, we made the decisions that we thought were good decisions at the time. We didn't wake up one morning and go, oh yeah, let me make a disastrous decision. So you make the best decisions you can, and things didn't work out. But I think the takeaway for me on that and what I would share with people is I should have known better. Coming from a farm country of Indiana, I'm smart enough to know that farmers always protect their seed. They don't get, I've played enough Monopoly in my life to know I should have been smarter than that. Monopoly really is a game that's a lot like business. It's a lot like real life. And I should have known better. So when you look back on that, it's easy to beat yourself up. But the reality is it happened. It happened for a reason. I didn't, coming out of that, I didn't know what that plan was or what the Lord's vision was, but I can only look back on it now, 13, 14, 15 years later, and say there was a reason, and I hope that it made me smarter. I hope it made me wiser. I hope my experiences will, like we're talking on this podcast, I hope those experiences that we've all had will help the next generation. And what I would have done differently and what I should have done, and the answer to your question really is just be a little bit conservative and minimize the risk. And again, that kind of comes back to that game of Monopoly is, you always want to have enough in reserves to be able to cover a downside, even though, most of us, like you say, we're hooked on hopium. Mm-hmm. You don't tend to think about the downside, and I certainly didn't see it coming, and hope that never happens again.
Yeah. So you grew up on a farm in Indiana. What?
Not on a farm. I grew up in the farm country, but not on
the farm country. Okay.
Not a working farm. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's good advice. Be conservative. The business is cyclical. When things are good, I heard a quote. When things are good or when things are bad, just remember this too shall pass. When things are really high and
that's right,
and the work comes easy and everything's flowing, this too shall pass. And when things are bad, my wife's grandfather used to say that. Just remember, nothing lasts forever. The good doesn't last forever, and neither does the bad. And that is so true. It's good advice, man. There's so much advice from. If you get the opportunity to sit down and talk to somebody who's over 80 years old, they've been through some stuff, and they're a national treasure. And I especially those folks who grew up during the Depression, they had a different approach on things.
Yeah.
So, well, I appreciate you sharing that. That's good stuff. So let's shift gears. So we've been working together for a couple of years now. I think we've known each other for several years, and you started working with our team about 2 years ago, somewhere in that neighborhood. Mm-hmm. So I'm curious, what was going on? What challenges or issues were you dealing with that led you to reach out to us initially?
I remember in those early years always kind of thinking, I don't want to end up being Jeff the Builder. I never wanted to be the guy where everything was always on just my shoulders. But yet the way I ran my business, the way I ran Masterpiece, it kind of was all on my shoulders. I did all the estimating. I did all the sales. I was the project manager, ran a very small company. When you do that, I finally came to realize that I was the speed governor. I was the restrictor plate that was sort of holding us back from growing. Now, whether that was control issues or probably more accurately, it was probably fear of losing control. I finally got to a point where I came to realize that I had spent my career learning how to be a great contractor, but I could only do so much. And what I had built really wasn't a saleable asset. It wasn't something that I could, turn over to somebody. And I realized that I needed to grow and be able to do things differently. And then along comes the pandemic. And if anybody remembers those first few weeks of March of 2020, well, honestly, we all didn't know whether we were still going to be in business. We didn't know what the future held. It scared the heck out of a lot of people, a lot of us. And I remember as we were 2 or 3 months into it, I started getting wind of these co-construct sessions led by this guy named Todd DeWalt, and started to figure out who you were and what you were about. I really enjoyed those sessions. I found out about Construction Leading Edge podcast and started to become a disciple of that. I guess it was a couple years ago when I went to the first live meetup. And it was through what I was hearing from you and what I was learning through Construction Leading Edge that I came to realize that my problem was I spent my career learning how to be a great builder, but I didn't learn how to build great systems. And when you started offering the program of systematizing your construction business and what that could do for us, I was like, wow, that's an eye-opener. So that's initially what attracted me. And I'm glad that we made the move to sign up for that program.
Yeah, me too. You said something that I want to talk about. You said there was a fear of losing control, and what I found is that word fear it's a big deal. It's a big problem. I think sometimes we think the problem is out there, and it's really not. The problem is we're afraid. So if you don't mind, I'd like to dig into that a little bit. So I heard you say you realize you need to grow, but you had some fear and some concerns about that. What were you concerned about? What were you worried about as you thought about growing the business?
Well, at the time, I would never have been smart enough to know or to call it fear, because we all justify, rationalize in our own minds. So living through it, my thought process was, and I had hired some people. I tried to hire a superintendent, a construction manager, and again, I just didn't have the systems in place to really let that flourish. So I went through some people over the years, and finally I had some great carpenters at the time, and kind of sort of rationalized it to myself as, well, we'll just settle for the lead carpenter concept with me running things and a couple of really good lead carpenters, and that system worked. It worked very well. We produced some awesome custom homes for great clients. Did a lot of renovation projects, did a few historically significant projects for our local municipalities here, and I'm very proud of our track record and what we accomplished. So at the time, I didn't know it was fear. It was only looking back on it now, after I've kind of seen further out on the horizon and kind of seen that there is another way of doing things, I sort of identified as fear. And I'm not even sure that I would really admit that it was fear. It was just a hesitation of losing control. You bring all these other people on, what if it doesn't work out like it's supposed to? And to be very honest, because of the fact that we didn't have enough of the right systems in place, that was what was causing things to not work out. We had some systems and we did a lot of things. We did some things right, but there's a lot of things that we didn't get right. We had years that we did really well, and we had a lot of years that we were just mediocre. And I believe that was because of how I was running the business and the lack of systematizing that made it what it was.
Hey, it's Todd, and we'll get back to the episode in just a minute, but let me ask you something. Have you ever signed a contract and then everything starts to feel a little bit chaotic? Questions fly around like, who's ordering what? When does the job actually start? Is the team ready? Did anybody order this material? Has this been approved yet? Project starts to feel like a fire drill, right? Well, the biggest problem in most construction businesses isn't a lack of effort. It's not the people. It's not the projects. It's not the clients. It's not you. It's the gaps in your process. Gaps where details fall through the cracks, where nobody's sure what to do, who's doing what, when it gets done, and you, the owner, end up filling in all those gaps, right? When there are questions, who they got to call? If there's a problem, it's going to land in your lap. And the biggest gap is pre-construction. And the solution is simple. Nailing the handoff from sales to construction. Nail the handoff from the office to the field. Your projects are like a relay race, and there's a baton that needs to be handed off. Nailing the handoff is a well-designed pre-construction process that closes those gaps, eliminates the chaos, and gives you back control. It gives you back the time so you can work on the business instead of being buried in it. And we can help you build that process. The first step is to book a free business evaluation call with our team. On your business evaluation call, here's what we're going to help you do. Spot the real gaps that are creating the chaos, show you how to nail the handoff and how doing that will put you back in control of your business. We'll even uncover some of the hidden profit that's already in your business. And if it makes sense, we'll talk about how we can help you build a business that runs without you. Click the link in the show notes to schedule your call. Be advised, we only have a few spots available each week, and not everybody qualifies for this call. This is not for everybody. So if you have a wave of work coming at you, or you're planning on growing and hiring people, now's the time to close those gaps with a good pre-construction process. If you're ready to stop reacting and finally take control, this is your next step. Go book your free business evaluation call with my team today. So when you say you didn't have enough of the right systems, what do you mean? Looking back on it, what was missing?
In those years, I thought we could be a company that was structured. I always called it, three legs of the stool: sales and marketing, construction operations, and finance and accounting were the three. And some of the things that I started to discover after working with you about systematizing, and you talk a lot about nail the handoff, and it really kind of opened up my eyes that we're actually, to be properly functioning, you really need to be four areas. And so we introduced the pre-construction area. So we now have four areas of focus within the company. And I think that has made a lot of difference. Now, it's been a bumpy ride. We're not where we're going to end up, as you well know, but we're on the right track. And so figuring that out, and, and again, are you okay with me just kind of telling you what's on my mind and my heart?
Absolutely.
So, you introduced me to the term of the JETS theory, and whether that was I guess that was probably in one of the podcasts or something, or part of the program, the just enough to start. And I had an epiphany when you elaborated on the problems that can come when you use a just enough to start. And I went, oh man, I'm the poster child for that. So little by little, as we started diving deeper into your nail to handoff process and the things that you and your team offer of systematizing your construction business, it just really started opening my mind up that, like, yeah, we've done a great job of laying an awesome foundation. We have a great reputation in town. We can do so much better.
So when you, I like that term. I remember you saying that we're the poster child for just enough to start. What kind of problems were you having? What did the symptoms of the just enough to start trap look like for you?
There is a construction training guru, I can't think of his name right now, but always talked about even flow planning. We were the opposite of that. We would start a project, and at the time I thought I was doing a good job of defining some of what we know as the big five, the plumbing fixtures, appliances, cabinets, lighting, and flooring. I thought I was doing such a great job of that, but there were too many things where we didn't get it predefined with the client, and we would just plug in what we thought were appropriate budgets. I don't particularly care for the word allowance, because I think in our industry that word is abused. I think the whole concept of a budget allowance sometimes gets abused. I think, builders who don't know or are afraid to ask enough questions, just plug a number in to kind of make their numbers look good, but it's not appropriate. We did some of that. So we kind of had to live with the consequences of that, of somewhat of a herky-jerky kind of production schedule. Things would seem like they're going along pretty well, and then all of a sudden we kind of have to hit the skids for a few weeks to drop back and help finalize a couple decisions on this or that. And again, I'm very proud of the work that we've done over the years. And I think for the most part, we have delivered great quality to great clients. But when I look at how we performed, even though I know that my company has a great reputation in town, I look back at the way we produced the projects, and I'm not sure that the experience that the client lived through has always been something that we would be extremely proud of. I'm not sure it's always been A+. There's been a lot of projects that were considerably less than that, of not the finished work, but the process to get to the finish line.
Let's talk about that for a minute. One of the common things with construction is it's like the expectation is, okay, you're going to have a good finished product, right? When we're done, it's going to be a good finished product, but it could be a little bumpy. You don't want to see how the sausage is made. And it seems like the experience during the process isn't that important. And I think there's an expectation that the experience is going to suck during the process. Like I've heard people say, hey, you're going to build a custom home. There's a pretty good chance you might get a divorce as a result of it. So get ready. So for the people who believe that the experience doesn't matter to the customer, let's talk about that. What do you think? How important is the experience during the pre-construction process and during the construction process? And why is it important?
I know that for many years, part of our company culture and kind of our guiding principles was, defining success as helping each client have an outstanding experience, quote unquote. I became aware of the fact that all sounded great in our literature, but that our actions weren't always consistent with that. And that what you just said about making sausage, I remember one time put my arm around a client's shoulders who was completely stressed out. And I had to put my arm around his shoulders and said, Mark, just remember, building a custom home is a lot like making sausage. And he looked at me and said, it's not something you ever want to watch. He smiled, and I could see the stress drain from his face. But I don't think we prepare people for, I don't think we were preparing people for the amount of effort it was going to take on their part for just the hundreds and hundreds of decisions that would need to be made. And, again, it's like if you don't know any better, it's not intentional. We weren't doing it intentional, but, a client shows up on the job site and 5 different tradesmen are grabbing them to ask, exactly where do you want to have this light fixture centered? Many things that should be ironed out early on, I think, stress people out. So I'm not sure I'm really answering your question, but I think I will say this, I used to tell clients this, that I've spent a lot of years in my tour of duty kind of analyzing our industry and sort of looking at why is builder A seem to be successful and everything's great for him? Why is builder B struggling? And I have known for many, many years, at least in my opinion, I shouldn't say I know, my opinion is that it's kind of how they run their business. And the fact that builders that maybe aren't as successful as they would like to be, builders and remodelers, this is true for remodeling too, and we do both. Rarely does a contractor get a bad rap because there was a few bad drywall joints or maybe a couple of miter joints in the crown molding weren't 100% perfect. 99% of the horror stories that I've heard over the years, in some way, shape, or fashion, involve how the contractor ran his business. The horror stories of, my builder never listened to anything I said. My builder was never on the job site. Those of us who have been in this game a while, you hear a lot of that stuff. So I think it's a great idea for any of us in the business to kind of reassess and look at how we're running our operation, but looking through it through the lens of a client. And I've said for years, I used to kind of make a joke out of this, but I guess I kind of really do feel this way. I think the licensing laws in the state of Florida should be rewritten. They should require a contractor to build his own home for his own family once every 7 years, just to be refreshed of what it's like through the client's eyes, because it can be a pain.
That's good advice. I think it's, what you said.
You wanted me to be honest, right?
That's great. I think so many people, so many builders completely ignore the customer. And they just think, well, this project, it's my project. I have to build this thing and I have to do what's best for me. And they just completely ignore what the customer wants. And what I see coming in the next few years, what I see coming is an increased importance of the experience. In the not too distant future, customers will expect a good finish quality and a good experience. And for those people who say it's going to be rough, it's going to suck, but we'll have a good finished product for you, they're going to go the way of Blockbuster, and they're just going to get disrupted. So if you want to stay in business, I think you need to communicate well. You need to have a good process. Like you said, the problems and the nightmare stories are about the business side of it. So it's not just about living in the projects, selling projects, building projects. It's about how you run your business. That's great advice. Mm-hmm. So speaking of that, so you've done a lot of great work in the past couple of years, implemented quite a few changes and systems and processes in your business. What would you say are the top 2 or 3 systems or processes that you've put into your business that have been most impactful for you?
Adding the pre-construction area of focus and focusing on becoming better at nailing the handoff or creating start packages is probably the biggest one. And that requires a little effort. It requires a little bit of self-honesty. It requires check your ego at the door and kind of realize that, we've done a lot of great work, but the way we've gone about it, we need to do some things differently. And I've been blessed. I will tell you this too. I have been very blessed in my career that God has sent great people into my world. I've been blessed not only with a ton of great clients, but teammates, folks that have joined the Masterpiece. I didn't do this all just Jeff himself. I've had a lot of great people, a lot of talent have been part of my team over the years. But when we started this evolution of making some change. I kind of looked at a couple of the key people that we have, and our construction manager, our construction administrator. I realized the stress it was putting on them. At that point, I kind of glossed over that, but as part of the growth of our company, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, I came to realize that the time had come that I needed to kind of grow the business. So I hired a construction manager. A couple years later, had to make a change. So it wasn't just me anymore. We did kind of grow the company, and the org chart got a little bigger. I didn't know anything about an accountability chart at that point. But I could see that the way we had been doing things was creating a lot of stress for my key people. Not to mention the guys in the field, our lead carpenters, not to mention the clients who probably felt a lot of frustration. So when we started putting some of these processes in place, I could see that was going to be a relief to the people in the front lines that needed it. Even the implementation of that was not perfect, and we had some bumps in the road of getting through that. But I think any of us in this business, and anybody listening to this, you got to remember it's not just you and your company; it's how the client's taking it. So the improvements that we make in the process, not only is it making things better for the client experience, it's making things smoother for our team, and it's less stress for the team.
Yeah. So it sounds like pre-construction, a focus on pre-construction, nailing the handoff had a big impact. What were some of the positive ripple effects of nailing the handoff and a focus on pre-construction?
Knowing more of the finished details earlier on and not having to run into a hard stop to take a timeout and then get with the client to figure it out. Now, keep in mind, too, let me kind of remind you of the last few years as we were trying to work through this process. Remember when that was. So as much as we were making great efforts in trying to get things locked in earlier and kind of finalizing things, it was also during the time coming out of COVID when we were having supply chain issues. So again, a lot of this stuff, if you're in normal times, it works a little better, but you think you're so proud because you have everything locked in, and then all of a sudden you find out, oh, well, that tile that we picked, 6 months ago, no longer available. And got to redo that. So even that has not been perfect. But my advice to others is, and what I've tried to do, I've tried to just sort of enjoy the process and not get too stressed out about it, and just know that anything that we're doing to improve is headed in the right direction. There's an Alan Jackson song, it's called Work in Progress. And he says, the Lord asked me to tell you, be patient. I'm a work in progress. And I try to remember that. And Todd, we've talked a lot about, and you've done podcasts about living in the gain and not focusing on the gap of the shortfalls, but focusing on the progress that you've made. And that has been very, very helpful. So, if anybody on my team is listening to this podcast, hey, I admit we're not where we need to be yet, but we're headed in the right direction. And I think we are doing better. I think clients appreciate that. And we'll stay focused, and we'll get it dialed in.
So you mentioned living in the gain. What does living in the gain mean to you? I've done a couple of podcast episodes on this, but what does that mean? What does living in the gain mean to Jeff Bowers?
Well, I have not read the book by Dan Sullivan, so I can only go with the context of the discussions with you and the podcasts I've listened to. It's, if you look at the effort that's expended to make a change and then the amount of change, kind of the delta, it's focusing on what you've accomplished, not on how much you still have left to do.
And how does that shift in focus help you?
Well, it helps me keep a positive attitude. It keeps me from drifting into the weeds and looking back over my shoulder and focusing on the the negativity and the negative side of what we're trying to change. And so whether it's just me or whether it's meetings with my team, I remind everybody, look at how far we've come in just a couple of short years, and look at how much more effective we are and how much better things are.
Yeah. So what is different now about your business and your life compared to 2 years ago? You put in a lot of work, done a great job implementing these systems. I know you're not satisfied with it, but you're never going to be satisfied with it. Let's be honest. You've done a great job implementing and sticking to it. What's different now after a couple of years of working on your business?
I feel that not only that I feel that I'm more in control, but I think we as a team are more in control of our projects, and I feel like there's less chaos. And, we still have, again, not to focus on the gap or think of the negativity, but, we still have challenges trying to get trade contractors to show up when they're supposed to. And I think when you depend on other humans, that's going to be kind of normal for a while. So I think we got to take the good with the bad, but trying to stay focused on the positive and the benefit has been that we're more in control of things. We don't seem to be quite as stressed out. It's not as chaotic as it was. Still challenging, but not as chaotic.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about chaos. I think some people would say, you know what? Construction's chaos. It has to be. There's no way around it. And it's just the nature of construction. Does construction have to be, does it always have to be chaos? What do you think?
I don't think so. But I do know that when I heard some of your early sessions, when I first became aware of you and who you were, that was one of the things that really caught my ear. Maybe it was when you were talking about the jets theory and the amount of, I kept hearing you talk about chaos. And I thought, man, that guy knows our business already. But no, I don't think it needs to be. I think construction can be a work of art if things are done in the right sequence with enough pre-planning and pre-preparation. I don't think it has to be chaos.
Hey, it's Todd. We'll get back to the episode in just a minute. If you're thinking about growing your construction business, maybe you've been wondering things like, how do I know if my business can handle more work without falling apart? Is now the right time to grow, or should we just stay where we're at? Am I missing something that could blow up if I scale too fast? Do I have the right structure in place to support growth and to be able to grow safely? Maybe you're worried about burning out your team or burning out yourself. You're worried about winning more work, but then losing control of the quality and having that hurt your reputation. Maybe you're concerned about getting stuck in more chaos, having more problems instead of having more freedom, or finding out too late that your systems just weren't strong enough to handle the growth. Well, here's what's surprising. A company studied why successful contractors fail, and they found out two things. Number one, contractors don't starve to death. They get too much work too fast with inadequate resources, and then they run out of cash. The second thing that they learned after studying a couple of hundred successful contractors that failed is that contractors are actually more likely to go bankrupt during a growing economy than during a downturn. So how do you know if your business is ready to scale? How do you know when it's time to hire more team members, to go after another market, to sell more work? Well, that's a big question that a lot of people are grappling with. It's a question I get a lot. So that's why I created an assessment tool to help you answer the question, is your construction business ready to scale? This assessment is free, it's online, and you'll get a customized report showing exactly where your business is strong and where the hidden gaps are that could trip you up. It's the fastest way to get clarity before you put your business and your future at risk. So if you want to take the free assessment to find out, is your construction business ready to scale? The link is in the show notes. I agree. So let's talk about implementation. Implementation is tough. That's really where the benefit comes from. It's not information. If it was all about information, if that's all it took to fix your business, then every business would be fine because all of the information's out there, right? You could just read the books, take the courses, watch videos, whatever. But it comes down to implementation. So what would you say are a couple of the keys to implementation? What were some tools, mindset changes? What were the keys to implementing those systems and actually making meaningful change in your business? What do you think?
Well, being honest, I think one of the first things that I had to overcome was you had a live meetup in Austin, Texas, and one of your sessions, you talked a lot about, let me see if I can say it right. Amateurs train till they get it right. Professionals train until they can't get it wrong. And you did a session talking about that, about, all the preparation the Navy SEALs go through to become the experts they are. And the point of that session, what my takeaway was, that I needed to go into training to learn how to become a better business owner. So even though I had spent my career learning how to be a great contractor, I didn't spend enough time learning how to be a great construction company owner. So that was the first thing that first hurdle I had to get across. And I think it's tough trying to seek implementation when you have so many areas of the company that needed attention and needed fine tuning. I had to figure out how to prioritize. And we still to this day have had some challenges trying to bring on some more skilled talent. We all know that there's a limited amount of skilled people out there. And fortunately, our industry has been responding. And I think we're all going to find that it's going to get better over the next 4, 5, 10 years. So prioritizing the areas of what needed to be improved first, I think, was very helpful too. Starting with me.
Yeah, let's talk about. I think that's a crucial realization. Is it starts with me. What were some of the? How did you need to start thinking differently? Like you mentioned, you need to train to be a business owner, and full transparency, I heard that from Craig Groeschel, who has a fantastic podcast, the Craig Groeschel Leadership Podcast. And it may have even been from one of his messages at Life Church, but he talked about the difference between trying and training. And I think a lot of people try, like, well, I'm going to try. And are you going to try or are you going to train? Because those are two very different approaches, two different mindsets. Like trying means, yeah, we'll do it if it works. And if it doesn't work, I'll quit. But training says, like the Navy SEALs, we're going to train until we can't get it wrong. Completely different approach. What were some other mindset changes that you've made over the past couple of years? How do you think differently now?
Well, let's not forget what Master Yoda says. There is no try, only do. I can't do the Yoda voice, but Todd, over the years, I've read so many books, so many great books about leadership, and one that came up the other day, and we were talking, was E-Myth by Michael Gerber. And you read some of this stuff, and taking that and putting it into action sometimes is a little challenging. So what was the question? Was it implementation?
Mindset. How do you think differently now? What are some of the mindset changes you've made over the past couple of years?
Well, I had to come to grips with the fact that although for many years I thought that I was a really good leader, maybe I was not exhibiting enough of the right leadership. Maybe I wasn't as good of leader as I thought I was. So maybe I needed some work first to get my leadership skills better. And had to, well, again, it kind of comes back to ego, because it's real easy, especially with 40 plus years under my belt. It's real easy to say, hey, I've been successful years. We have a great reputation. But if I'm being honest with myself, we might have a great reputation, but we're not doing as well as we could be. And, there's some folks live with an adage of, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Well, that adage never made sense to me because, okay, maybe it's, maybe you're limping along at 75% efficiency and you could tweak a few things, tighten a couple of lug nuts, fix a few things, and next thing you know, you're at 90% efficiency. Well, that's a difference between a C and an A. 90 is an A minus, but you get my point. So I think being open and honest with myself was one of the first things I had to do. And then get buy-in from some of my leadership team, some of the people that are with me that, that I lean on a day-by-day basis. I think I had to get buy-in from them that they were in agreement that we needed to make some changes. And, once those changes started to happen through implementation, I could almost see signs of relief on their face. But I really think that being open-minded and honest with ourselves and being truthful with ourselves of the assessment of how efficient are we or how well are we currently running is critical. Because you can't make changes if you're not open-minded to making change.
Yep. Well put. Let's shift gears a little bit and let's talk about the CEO Alliance. So you joined the CEO Alliance almost a year ago, as soon as we opened up that program. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious, how would you describe the CEO Alliance group in your own words? And then what has being in that group done for you, if anything? I mean, frankly, some of these guys in your group are a pain in the ass. And, I hope they're listening right now. I'm just kidding. But how would you describe the CEO Alliance and what it's done for you?
I feel very fortunate that I was in the right time at the right place, and I feel very fortunate to have been invited in with this particular group of folks. And I need to say too, Todd, I hope you don't mind me throwing this out, but I've been involved with the builder group for 26, 27 years of guys that we meet twice a year. And I have built great relationships with them, but we've gotten to the point, we've been together so long that it's no longer a peer advisory board per se. It's just become a bunch of us who've been very successful over the years and then kind of enjoy getting together a couple times a year where there's very little coaching that goes on. So I'm having a blast working with Construction Leading Edge. I'm having a blast working with you and Leah and Manish. And I love the guys that you've paired me with. And no names mentioned. Don't want to embarrass anybody. But the group I'm in is awesome. I think we tackle some pretty big topics. And for me, it really has become, sounding board, friends, advisory board, surrogate board of directors, if you will. That's the other thing is that those of us who are in business and are business owners, many times we don't have the right kind of support group or the right kind of a board of directors. And so, you have helped our group build some accountability in, and I find myself being much better at tackling assignments and getting things done and getting reports back to the group because I don't want to let the guys down. And I value their input. I think you're doing a great job of leading the group, if that's the right word. I'm not sure what the right word is. And I know as we continue to spend time together going forward, friendships and bonds are going to be stronger and tighter. And, I love the dudes that I'm with. I think, like I say, I consider myself very fortunate and very blessed that you put me with the group that I'm in. Great people. And
it is.
I know that I get a lot out of it, but I try to bring my A game, and I'm very cognizant of the difference between being a giver and a taker. And I don't want to be just a taker. I want to try to give. If there's anything that I can bring to the group that's valuable to them, I want to do it because I know how much I get out of it. I want to make sure that I'm also giving.
Yeah, it is a great group. And I don't think I could have, I didn't expect it to be as impactful and as close knit and as powerful as it has become. The concepts and the topics of conversation and the things that we're working on that group, like it's spouses know each other. We get together a few times a year. The friendships that have developed, it's I knew it was going to be good, but it's way better than I expected. You mentioned a board of, like a surrogate board of advisors or a board of directors. I was reading a book. It was a book published by R.S. Mean, something about managing a profitable construction business. And it's written by a PhD and a CPA. And they talk about the importance of having a board of advisors or a board of directors. And most small businesses don't have that, and they might overlook that idea. But what are the benefits of having a group of other people, board of advisors, people who understand your business, know what you're dealing with? What does it do for you to have that group?
Gives me the confidence of knowing that I will get honest feedback on decisions I need to make or directions that we're going. I will get honest feedback that if I'm about to do something that doesn't make sense or maybe isn't such a great idea, I know they'll speak up. I know if I have a good idea of things we're doing and I hear from them that they echo the fact that it's a good idea and it's a good move, gives me a level of confidence.
Yeah, confidence. That's a big deal.
I think one time we talked about the book by Jim Collins called Good to Great, and what separates good companies, what separates great companies from all the good companies. And there's a bunch of different criteria that Jim Collins came up with, but one of those things, if you take the time to read the book, one of the things is having that group of advisors, either as part of your company or an outside board, to kind of help with guidance and leadership. And that's what the CEO Alliance does for me.
Yeah. It's very powerful. I'm curious, to the extent you're willing to share. I know a big part of the CEO Alliance is creating outcomes, 12-month outcomes, performance goals, and then working toward those. What are a couple of the goals that you're focused on right now in your business? It might be interesting for folks to hear, like, oh wow, I didn't even know that was an option, that I could set a goal like that. But what are some of the goals you're focused on right now?
Well, do you want me to name numbers?
Sure, to the extent you're comfortable with.
Well, let's say this. The average year for us compared to where our goals are and where we're headed, we're on track to double our business volume. And we've done that by increments. And last year in 2023, due to a couple of contracts not starting when they should, we fell a little short of our goal. But each year we've kind of been ramping that up, working towards doubling what we used to do. And along with that, when you start to scale up your business, you scale up your overhead. And as we talked last week, our business is no longer structured as what it used to be. We're structured to the higher numbers now. So that's part of it. So sales volume to hit those goals. And one of the things that I have learned through this CEO group is quarterly, which some people might call baby steps. Sounds like Dave Ramsey. But I used to set goals for the year, and I've become aware of how much more beneficial it is to break that down in quarterly goals. I have a goal of personal weight loss, and that's not really business related. You wouldn't think. But if you start to look at it through my role as the CEO and the skipper of the ship, I have a duty and an obligation to my family, to the people who have entrusted their livelihoods to me, I have an obligation to be at peak performance and stay healthy. And, not even to say the unmentionable, but what happens if I get sick and go in the hospital for 3 or 4 weeks? That would suck. So I have an obligation to keep an eye on my health, and I've let my weight in the pursuit of business. I've let my weight and some of my living, my habits and some of life skills maybe kind of fall by the wayside. Focused on business, don't get enough exercise, put a couple pounds on a year over the course of 30, 40 years. Next thing you know, I don't know if this is where you were headed, but this is part of my story, So one of the things that you have been able to help me with is the focus. I'm not a highly focused person. I don't know if I use the other side of the brain or something. I'm not super, super detail driven. I'm not super, super laser focused. So those are areas of my personality that I have to really work hard at. And hitting a weight loss goal last year was pretty awesome for me. And I realized that it's the daily focus and weekly focus and monthly focus, and putting the activity in to make it happen was really important. So that's kind of a second one. I have some goals for this year of the next bracket of weight loss. And then the second half of the year, we're going to do it again. And then the third major focus that I have right now is dialing in what we call the big five of my role as CEO, president of the company. As the skipper of the ship, my role has changed a lot. And everything we've been talking about this morning is how the company has grown, how we've done things differently. So the way Masterpiece Design Build is structured now versus what it was 3 or 4 years ago is completely different. And so my role has changed with that. And so part of my daily, weekly, monthly focus is dialing in on my efficiency as CEO, as a skipper of the ship.
Good stuff. Good stuff. I appreciate you sharing that. So a couple more questions for you. One more question, then I'll get to some rapid fire questions I'm going to hit you with. What's one piece of advice you wish somebody had given you 10 or 20 years ago? They went back to young Jeff Bowers 10 or 20 years ago. What's one piece of advice you wish somebody would have given you back then?
Well, I probably was given this advice, but was probably just too stuck in my own ways, or probably didn't hear it, didn't understand it. I wish that somebody would have advised me on focusing on building systems and building the company and not worry so much about focusing on becoming a great builder. I wish I would have put more focus on building the organization and building people. I've known for many years that people, is a major asset to any company. I just didn't focus on it well enough, early enough.
Good advice. That's probably a better question is, what's the advice you wish you would have listened to? Because I remember when I was 30 years old, I didn't take advice very well. And I was really dumb to not avail myself of other people's wisdom. I remember some conversations, I remember some really good advice that I didn't take several times. And probably because I was too dumb, too proud to take it.
I think I said it earlier. I think when we're in our 20s and 30s, we're hard charging, we're invincible. We think it's all on us, and it's only after some successes and some failures you start to realize that it's about more than us. And I know in my case, there is definitely a divine thumbprint on my story. God has steered things for me over the years. I don't necessarily witness that as much as I probably should. And some people may hear that and be offended by it. I hope not. But I look back over it, and the right people came into my life at the right time. The right client came into my life at the right time. Certain failures came at certain times to help me learn certain things. And I think as we all look back on our lives and our careers, we all see those pain points of where pain and wins and stuff. So I think you just have to really be a little bit philosophical, a little bit introspective. I think we all have to kind of walk on faith. But that's the other thing that I wish I would have understood 20, 30 years ago when I was younger, that keep in mind that it's not all on me. It's not just me. Surround yourself with the right inspiration, the right advisors, and know that it's not just you.
That is fantastic advice. I wish I would have listened to that advice 20 years ago. Yeah. A couple of rapid fire questions. If somebody is in Stuart, Florida, what is the restaurant or bar that you would recommend they make sure they hit so they don't miss out on something? Where's the place to go in Stuart?
Sailor's Return in downtown Stuart. It's on the river. It's one of the few places in Stuart, because the sun sets in the west, the ocean's in the east. It's one of the few places in Stuart where you can actually see the sunset come down to the water over the river. Great food.
Sailor's
great
Return.
drinks, great atmosphere.
Do they serve pina coladas in plastic buckets there?
Not in the buckets like you're referencing. They do have pina coladas, but not in buckets.
Next question. Are you more of a book guy or a movie guy? Which do you prefer?
I am usually a really good reader. That's not a fair question because, they're both great. I will tell you that I have not been reading as much as I should. I've been relying too much on my tablet and too much on the digital screen and need to read more. And that could also include reading in Kindle and whatnot. But I guess I've always felt like I was a pretty good reader. But I like a good movie too.
What's a good book you've read recently? Fiction, nonfiction, business related, whatever.
I am reading one right now that I got from Leah called The Speed of Truth by Stephen Covey's son, Stephen R. Covey.
Okay.
I intermix non-business stuff. And there's a series of books. I can't remember who the author is right off C.J. Box is the author. Set in the Western, like out in Wyoming or something. So I'll sprinkle a couple of those in and then go back and read some of the classics. Like I reread Good to Great recently.
So you're a guitar player, right? Play a little guitar?
Yes.
What kind of guitar do you play?
I have a Ovation roundback that as I got older and my front got rounder, the back of the guitar didn't necessarily fit with that. So I still have it. And it's a great guitar. But I recently bought a Martin acoustic. And I think the model is a double aught. It's a little bit smaller body, a little easier to finger the fretboard, just kind of sitting around on the couch and stuff.
Is there like some of those Martins? I've played some old Martins, and there's something about it's more than just strings and wood. There's something about a Martin. Is there a noticeable difference with the Martin?
It has a great feel. Feel.
Yeah. All right. Well, good stuff. Well, Jeff, if somebody wants to apply for a job, they want to follow you guys, find out go to your website, go to social media, where's the best place for them to go to learn more about your company?
Well, our website is masterpiecebuilders.com, which was the original name of the company before we rebranded. But on social media, we're Masterpiece Design Build on Facebook, Instagram. Our phone number, 772-283-2096. Great
stuff. Well, Jeff, it's been a pleasure, man. It's been a pleasure having you on here.
Thank you.
It's been a long time coming, and it was worth the wait. So I appreciate you taking the time to be on here.
That's very, very kind of you. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Hey, it's Todd here. One more thing before you go. Remember, if you're dealing with chaos every day, if you're spending too much time in firefighting, if your whole team is in reactive mode, it's probably not your team, it's not your clients, it's not your project, it's not you, it's the gaps. And the biggest gap is the one between signing the contract and starting the job. That's where the details get missed. That's where the stress begins. And the fix is simple. It's a solid pre-construction process so you can nail the handoff from the office to to the field. We want to help you build that out. And the first step is to schedule your free business evaluation call. Click the link in the show notes. We're going to help you identify the root cause of your chaos, show you how to unlock the profit that's already in your business, and we'll lay out a plan to help you nail the handoff. And if it makes sense, we'll talk about what working together looks like. So click the link in the show notes to schedule your call with my team. Be advised, calls are very limited and not everybody qualifies for these calls. So go book your call today, and I'll see you next time.